Okay. Well, a very warm welcome to everybody who's watching this wonderful session that we're going to have tonight. Before the session has begun, we've had a few technical problems tonight. There must be something in the ether hovering above the United Kingdom and also the Isle of Man. But we see others joining us now, and Lynn Henschel, our secretary, has just joined. So things must be going well now. Anyway, a warm welcome to our Living Values webinar. We've been running these webinars for some time now, but we're really honored tonight to have the presence of Diane Tillman. Diane reminded me before we started that we've known each other for about 30 years. I just can't believe that. Time goes so quickly. But it's just such an honor to welcome Diane. Diane, if it weren't for Diane, I probably wouldn't have joined the group that went to New York all those years ago to found Living Values. And Diane is the principal author of this wonderful series of books, which I hope that you've got copies of. One of the books, not this particular one, but one of them is on the subject really of tonight about children who are affected by war, by being refugees. And this topic really is so near to our hearts at the moment, because I was yesterday in a city in the United Kingdom and I was talking to children in a values school, and two of the children were from Sri Lanka. And they told me how, because of the war that had been in Sri Lanka, they had come to the United Kingdom with their family. Their mums and dads couldn't speak any English, but they were overflowing with their praise of how both the community and the school had treated them as really refugees. And coming into a values school was so important to them because of the relationships, the acceptance, the way they were treated. Other friends of mine who are neighbors have accepted Ukrainian children, and those children, as we all know, are going through a lot of worries. So I can't think of someone in the world who's more able to talk on the subject tonight than Diane. Diane has worked in refugee camps in Thailand and other places in the world. She brings with her a great warmth and love for humanity, which I and everyone have felt who have worked with her. So without any more ado, Diane, it's great privilege to say welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so very much. Neil. It's always a pleasure to see you. It's always an honor to be with you. And I hope to be in England soon so I can enjoy seeing you in person.
Good.
And Peter, I see that you've joined us. It's really lovely to see you and Lynn, and I just met Sister Prakashini, and I know that this will go out on YouTube, so welcome to everyone. It's like being with family. So what I did this time is that I'm going to start with some pictures of when I was in some refugee camps in Thailand with the Karen tribe. And then we'll go into the topic of refugees and how to help them heal. But Neil, I appreciated that you sharing so much about the two Sri Lankan children who were so grateful for the community and the school and how they treated them. And that makes all the difference in the world. You know, to feel safe is so important when you've been in trauma and in war and in conflict. It's so very important. So I'm going to start with a PowerPoint, if I may. And if I can just get this from the beginning here. Okay, great. You should see it now well. So as you know, you're with Living Values Education, and tonight you're with Living Values Education in the British Isles. And so I'll start with a reflective question, and that is, if you were a refugee, what 2 values would you like the adults and children in your new country to treat you with? Would anybody like to respond? Hearing no response. I'm sure you could think of 2. Come on, you guys.
Love and kindness came immediately to me.
Beautiful.
I thought of respect and acceptance.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, great. So this was the camp that I was initially in, and it was very lovely. You see here the some of the teachers in the session, but it was a very beautiful place in many ways. It was in the middle of a jungle, and there was a lot of bamboo there. And the people made these houses here completely out of bamboo and leaves from teak trees. There were no nails in the houses. Everything was made out of bamboo and leaves. Everything. There were no windows. Across the floor was made out of larger bamboo pieces with the outside covering of the bamboo stretching across the other way. And the poles were several inches apart. So not truly comfortable for sleeping, but the first night was a challenge, but when I returned a year later, it was much better because I had a little cushion to sleep on. But, you know, there was a hose that could fill a bucket and one spigot for running water in the area that I stayed in, which had a few hundred people. This is the first training we did, and this was at the end of the training in 1999. And here's me, here's Rachel Flowers, and because it was an occasion, a lot of them were wearing their traditional clothes. They were very, very lovely people. We had a 9-day training initially, and the teachers were very depressed. As you can see, there's just a few smiles there, but they warmed up and started to share, and it was really, really wonderful. We had a wonderful time. Here's during one of our activities, they're singing a song, and these were 36 teachers. This is where they did the weaving, and they had the backstrap looms, very similar to what is used in Guatemala. The children in the first year we were there never smiled at us. They would stare and watch us for many hours, but they never smiled and they never played. These refugees had come across from Myanmar, Burma, where their villages were attacked. And so they were quite traumatized. This is a picture that Rachel took of some of the new arrivals before they built their own houses. This is another picture of a training the next year, and you see a huge contrast in terms of the smiles. It's really, truly remarkable. But during the 9 days, they did the healing activities that they were going to do for the children. And when we went back after a year, the teachers were telling me, instead of beating the children, we now hold their hand and guide them. And the changes were remarkable with these 36 teachers. The level of violence, which was quite high among the children, had gone down to nothing in some classes, like in Pamuk's class. I'm trying to find her in this picture, but in Pamuk's class, Pa's class of 16 to 20-year-olds, no one ever was violent. And she said they now no longer are mean. They no longer disrespect each other. They very, rarely get angry. But huge difference. This is our the second time we were, well, the third time we were there. This is one of the trainers years later. We continued to go for 5 years before a NGO took it over and put it permanently into the curriculum for all the camps along the western coast of Thailand, next to Burma. And so this is Ege, one of the main trainers, and his 2 children. And you see how he's touching his child, and she is too. When we went there, the parents were rarely touching their children, sometimes in aggression. But Pamuka, she said, now I let my granddaughter, sit in my lap. And I not only let her sit in my lap, I continue to hold her and cuddle her, even if she's pulling my hair. So there was a huge difference. This is the 5th year and the last year that we were there. And Laurie and Eck had come with me for that training. And we're now in a different refugee camp with people from many different camps, although we have our trainers. This is Ege and I forget the names. But anyhow, 3 trainers had become LVE trainers so they could carry it on for their tribe. But what I want to talk about today are the psychosocial elements that are important for well-being and for healing. So the primary one, or one of the most important things that really accompanies the other things, is a safe environment. So a safe environment, not only physically, but good, nurturing relationships with the adults. So in that refugee camp, initially the only nurturing relationship for most of them was their teachers, because their teachers had changed. There was the one mother of a little girl, and the children were doing living values activities. And so she came to the little girl's teacher, and she said to the teacher, please teach me how to be a peace star, like my daughter. My daughter is a peace star, and she's teaching me how to be peaceful. So it was very, very beautiful. But what happened is within 2 years, the entire camp changed. The adults would take the books that we had prepared for the teachers and to use with the students, the young adults, and they would read them. And in 2 years, there was complete change in these 2 camps of 11,000 people. And when I went back after 2 years, it was so beautiful, because what had happened is the parents, when we were driving up in a Jeep along a stream, because there's no roads, and I saw an adult holding his child at the edge of his little bamboo house. And he was holding that little child with so much love. And then I saw little girls playing a game. and they were so clean and neat. And they were playing a game with rocks. And then there was a huge group of children, probably about 20, 25 of them, and they were shouting with laughter. And they had made a ball out of old plastic and put rubber bands around it. And they were tossing it, and they were hitting the ball with their flip-flops, their shoes that they had. And they were laughing. This was in huge contrast. There was spontaneous play, there was creative play, there was a couple of little boys, probably around 8, that had made a toy out of bamboo and were floating it in this little, uh, it was like a little boat, and they were floating this in this small stream of water. So it was really, really beautiful. So how did this occur, and what lessons can we take from this for the classroom in different countries where there are refugees coming in from all parts of the world? And so again, a safe environment, good nurturing relationships with teachers, with adults. In Living Values Education, we advocate a culture of peace, respect, and caring for all. So not just teachers to children, but that the children learn to adopt that. And so the children learn to adopt that through the Living Values activities. And so these are the books that are recent books. And the first values unit in these books is a unit on peace. And in that peace lesson, there's many things where they can imagine a peaceful world. They learn about conflict resolution. They can talk about their feelings. They learn to listen to others. There's stories about no bullying and how to handle bullying. So these types of things are very important. Other psychosocial elements that are important is to allow young people to express their hurt and their other feelings. It seems that accepting and active listening and validating as appropriate are lost skills to much of humanity nowadays. I think that actively listening is such an important skill for us as an adult, but it's a skill that makes so many things happen in such a beautiful way between adults, between children, between adults and children. But this is really essential for the healing process. And it seems that in today's world, a lot of people are uncomfortable when others speak of pain. And so with children especially, they'll say, well, don't think of that. You're not there anymore. Don't think of that. It's not important now, you're here. So to deny how they feel is to cause them to feel that way is to do something wrong. That maybe it's wrong to do that. They shouldn't have those feelings. And so there can be shame involved. And so rather than being expressed and having it understood and resolving it and dealing with it, instead they feel the shame. I remember there was one teacher in New York, and she called me. She said, I did Living Values with a week. I did a week ago. I tried the very first lesson. And she said, and I want to tell you that Living Values doesn't work. And I said, oh, really? Okay, tell me about it. And she said, well, I have a group of 7 children and they've all been sexually abused. And so I use the Imagining the Peaceful World activity. And one of the boys in his world, he drew a gun. So I told him that that was really wrong, that I had asked him to draw a peaceful world and he put a gun in it, and that was wrong. And I said, and how do you think he might have felt when you said that? Silence. I said, okay, do you remember the training? Do you remember the training we did? And she said, yes. I said, now I want you to actively listen. You could even say, or, you could even share a little observation in the form of active listening by saying something like, wow, your peaceful world, your drawing of a peaceful world looks pretty scary. You have to have a gun in it. I said, how do you think he would have felt if you had said that? And she said, much better. I said, well, try it and see what happens. She called me about 8 weeks later, and she said, I want you to know this is the most successful group I have ever had in my career. She said, the children are just blooming. So active listening and providing hopeful things for children to think of are very important. Children naturally gravitate to peace, to a better world. And to think about those things gives hope. I've even worked with this with children that were entering into gangs, and it gave them a whole different view of life. And then they got to discuss what they wanted in the world. And then they were willing to learn the social skills to do that. So allow young people to express their hurt and other feelings, accept their feelings and acknowledge, actively listen, or validate them as appropriate. For example, in the refugee camp, when I was working with the teachers, I gave them one of the activities that I was asking them to do with their students. And that was to write something that had happened that they didn't like. So they all drew pictures of relatives being killed or something like that. And it was just, and then they each held up their picture and they shared it. And they would cry. And I had tears rolling down my face after a while. And I stopped active listening, and instead I said things like, war is really awful. That's a validating response. But I couldn't just sit there and say, so you felt really bad when your husband was killed, when your child was killed, when your sister was killed, when your mother was killed. And they would share these terrible things with me. And so I would intersperse active listening and validating to let them know that, yes, I agree, that love was so important and that war was really awful. This is healing. When you validate, when you active listen to the feelings of others. Active listening is not technically accepting, but validating is. So then they can own their feelings. And then we can do other things. For example, in living values, students learn, young people learn to surround their hurt with love, and to send in the refugee package, they actually learn to send love to those that have died. So in schools nowadays, yes, young people can express their hurt and other feelings. So I'm going to suggest that you start with all the students in your classroom with the peace unit, and that you start with the initial lesson of imagining a peaceful world. It's lesson 1 for 3 to 7 and 8 to 14-year-olds, and it's lesson 2 for young adults. And so start with that, but also you can add just one question. What don't you like? What do you think's wrong in the world? To give them an opportunity to talk about war or to talk about violence in the neighborhood or bullying or whatever their concern is. So the refugees get to share, but also the others. And they all get actively listened to. And then help them make sense of the world. So for little kids, it's going to be different than the older kids. For little kids, when they question about why people are mean or war, I just say that some people, some adults, have had all their love dry up. And so they don't have any love. And so they don't know how to create peace and love. And they get really mean inside and they get power hungry inside because they can't get love. And with older young adults, with older students, you can do one of the other exercises. I believe it's in respect, but it's problems of the world, and they can take like war and look at the values, look at the factors that cause that, look at the anti-values in those factors, and then look at the values that would solve it. So there's many different ways to look at it, but help them make sense of the world. And when you do that, somehow it always works out that when they learn that love and sharing and community create peace, they attune to that, and then they have something to grow towards as they continue to do other activities. So with values activities also help them see the contrast of the effects of values and anti-values. So we do that through mind mapping peace, mind mapping violence. And on one side, they look at what happens and they supply all the answers. What happens for the self, for others in the family, in the community, in schools, in the world, for peace, if there's peace in our hearts, or if people have violence. So they can really see how peace creates peace and how violence creates war. And they can even see that when they do honesty and dishonesty and corruption, and see how dishonesty and corruption creates marginalized people who don't have enough, who resort to anarchy because they're not getting their basic needs met. And so with values activities, help them develop a voice for their values. For example, in that first lesson, or in the second lesson in the peace unit, but in one of those lessons in the peace unit, there is ample opportunity for them to finish the sentence, I believe in peace because, and then they fill that in. And it's beautiful what they come up with. One of the teachers, when he was telling me about the changes of children in the refugee camp, he said to me, he was talking about how the children no longer fought. And then he said to me, and they used to not ask questions. And now they not only ask questions, they tell us what they think. So the children had bloomed. It was very beautiful. In fact, one of the things we advocate strongly is conflict resolution. So with conflict resolution, the children can solve their own problems and learn to communicate after about 6 weeks. But these little children in the refugee camp, they'd go to other children who were fighting that weren't LPE students, and they would say, you don't need to fight. You can solve your problems. Would you like us to help? And they would spontaneously do conflict resolution with others. So it's important to have activities to support friendliness and acceptance by their peers and encourage acceptance and appreciation of the cultures of all of the young people in the community. So one of the things that's important is that it's important not to just focus on the refugees. We could focus on the refugees in the camps because they were all refugees. But you're in regular schools, be they formal or informal. So for that, make sure that you're including all the students, because all students usually have an area where there's something they want to change or something that they're upset by. Even if they're a child that is a very good child, and a peaceful child and a loving child, perhaps they're really distressed when they see someone, an adult, mistreat a child, or there's something else. So give them all the opportunity to express, not just the refugees, and celebrate the cultures of the refugees that have recently arrived, as well as those that have arrived the year before, 5 years before, and also celebrate the cultures of the host country. There's activities for that in the tolerance unit. And I'd like you to know that all the values units are now free of charge on the livingvalues.net website. So we're trying to make them accessible to everyone. And then, of course, the last point here was to help them contribute to a better world through kindness and through other activities. There is a process. There's a value stimuli, and there's discussions, there's creative projects, there's developing their voices in creative ways, there's the mind mapping, there's the interpersonal skills such as conflict resolution, communication, active listening. There's also intrapersonal skills such as self-talk, such as learning to fill themselves with love. In the new books for young adults, there are activities that are relaxation and focusing exercises where they not only learn to fill the self with love and peace and respect, but they also recognize the pain that they're feeling and they learn to heal their pain. There's also a unit where they care for the earth and our oceans, and they learn that there's so many things they can do to help with climate change, to help the earth and our oceans. In daily life, every day, they can do so many things to help, because children nowadays need hope. We'll soon be publishing a book with just those units in order to take them to some of the environmental conferences. But children really care about this subject. So to allow them to contribute, allow them to develop their voice, but to really encourage friendliness, inclusion of all. Everyone in the school, be it adults, be it children. Even one child that is not accepted is quite harmful for that child, but it can also be quite harmful to the community. 97%, as you know, in the USA where I'm from, there's been a horrible, horrible crisis of school shootings. 97% of the school shooters are former students in that school. So the effect of being excluded your whole life or ostracized is incredibly harmful. And for some people, the hurt changes into anger. If they are corrupted by certain websites, or if they are influenced by violent movies, or if they're mentally imbalanced, unfortunately, that can lead to tragedy. So, really work to help everyone, include everyone. There was a lovely idea that was shared by a woman prior to the conference, to this call. And she said that she's had a lot of success with buddying, so that mothers from the mainstream culture and the refugee culture get together. And this has been very, very supportive to the refugee mothers, and has led to a lot of understanding, quicker integration, more self-respect. We actually had a LBE project in the Netherlands where they did this with families from the Netherlands and recent refugees from Somalia. And they would cook together with the mothers and the students, and they actually made a CD together. They learned songs and they made a CD together. I have found that when I buddy children, when I worked as a school psychologist, that sometimes it's too much for one child. So maybe have 2 children buddy, or there can be 3 children that have been there for a while that are assigned, that volunteer to be with the recent refugee. But if that's the case, have it be 3 from different cultures if you have many cultures. Always work to integrate. And if there's several refugees, then maybe everybody gets to buddy. And that way, and I always have them buddy with, if I'm going to start buddying with just one child, if there's just one refugee, I always make sure that the buddies are the most, how do I say this, popular students, popular and nice, so that everybody wants to be a buddy. And that works really well. But more than one, so that that person doesn't feel burdened by that or saddled by that. And that way they can have friendships with other children, sports with other children. But you can experiment and see whether 2 or 3 or 4 buddies works. But hopefully everybody will have an opportunity to do that. And that's good fun. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slideshow for 1 second. So help them contribute to that better world through kindness and other activities. And this, of course, is the Living Values Education theoretical model. And so when we do trainings, what we're encouraging educators and any parents we get to see this line in the middle. Do you notice how there's positive things up here and negative things down here? Okay. So what this theoretical model is hypothesizing is when people are treated in such a way that they feel loved, valued, respected, understood, and safe, then they move towards their potential. So the aim is whether the child's behavior, that's the B in the middle, is positive or negative, that we treat them as a valuable human being with kindness. Even if we're telling them, it's not okay to hurt people. That is absolutely not allowed. So I want you to go into this quiet place and think about that. And I know you can come up with an alternative of what you can do instead. So, so when we work with schools, we have them list the positive things that they can do. And we have them imagine what the school of their dreams would look like, and they come up with quality teaching methods. And we share with them about active listening and a thinking time out that isn't violent, but encourages them to think for themselves. And we look at all the negatives that might try to control through fear, shame, and punishment, and ways where we can eliminate behaviors that help children feel inadequate, hurt, afraid, shamed, or unsafe. So with young adults, we actually teach them this model now. And they experiment seeing how they can make their class a class that stays above the line. And this is a beautiful thing. But it's not just beautiful emotionally and socially. It's not only beautiful for resilience and self-respect, but it's also wonderful because it makes learning a lot easier. People want to come to school. I know Peter's on the call in the Kuwait American School. They have 97% attendance by the students and 95% for the teachers. That's pretty remarkable. So learning improves. There's more enthusiasm for learning. The children feel more successful. They are more successful. And there's better attendance as well. So remember, Peace Unit, if you want to, you can get the books on Amazon in the UK. We price them very inexpensively, but they are free, 1 unit at a time from livingvalues.net. Start with the Peace Unit, and that will do a lot of the things that I've discussed today. These are the current values units that are available free. We've only done book 1. It's because when we redid the books, they were getting so big that I just cut it in half, because I thought a 500-page book on values is going to give teachers carpal tunnel. So these are the 8 values in book 1. Book 2 has yet to be written. These will be the ones in book 2. This is the parenting guide. And it'll be an ebook fairly soon on the website for about £4. And it's very inexpensive also as a real book. But it also has screening guidelines, updated screen time guidelines for parents. And I think that this is very important. We talk about what children are watching, whether it's humanizing or dehumanizing. We talk about family life and whether monitoring is best, or to counsel them about the usage. But all 3 approaches are important in screen time. Screen time has really harmed the lives of many children when they get very addicted, or when they are corrupted by some of the very difficult things that happen in the world, whether they're being recruited by violent groups or whatever. And there's also a new training guide on the website. And I think that's the end of the slideshow. So I'm going to stop now, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Diane. That was incredible. I was thinking as you were speaking that this is such a good training talk that you've given for educators today. So thank you for that. But is
Thank
there anybody who would like to make a comment or ask Diane anything before we finish this evening? My evening, of course, not Diane's. Silence means affirmation. I was thinking, Diane, while you were talking, I was thinking of the words of Gabor Mate. He said, trauma is pain in isolation. And what you explained so articulately was how you worked in those refugee camps to eliminate pain by coming alongside it, by acknowledging it, by allowing feelings to be felt. Generations in the past have been told to not express their feelings. It's a thing that men in my culture were often taught. And then, of course, it comes out in all sorts of ways. You can't keep it under wraps. It'll express itself. So I just loved the way in your talk you were engaging us to really allow children's voice. And I so resonated too with what you said about deep listening. The biggest compliment I believe we can pay a human being is to deeply listen to them. And it's a skill that's taken me a lifetime to learn, and I'm still not that good at it. But I recognize—
I bet you are.
I don't know. I've still got a long way to go, I think, but I do try to listen more deeply, so that you understand not just the words someone is saying, but their thoughts and feelings that you can read in their body language and other ways. Yes, I was wondering what's happened now in Thailand to those camps. Have you had any update? Have they all dispersed now?
I don't know. I do know that the camp that I was originally at was dispersed, and that some of them went to other camps. But I do know that some of them have been able to become citizens. They were accepted for asylum by certain countries. So one of the trainers, Ege, who now Ege is now in Canada with his 2 children and his wife, and he's been there for quite some time. So some have been able to be accepted into other areas. But I was interviewed by a person some years ago, and they told me that there were a few camps that still existed, as I recall. I should check again.
Thank you. And just a piece of advice for us all, really, I'd like to ask you, if there was one piece of advice you'd give to the people of the world at the moment who are feeling really battered by national and international news, which is quite distressing for mental health, what piece of advice would you give folk?
I would say focus on what you are creating. Think about the world that you want. What do you want? Do you want a peaceful world? Do you want a compassionate world? Do you want an earth that is healthy and vibrant? Whatever you want, whatever values are yours, whatever virtues are yours, use them and strengthen them and create that around you. Create a circle of people around you that are positive, that are loving, and that are kind. And one of the things I feel very encouraged by is that our Living Values families and also other communities around the world are creating peaceful communities of kindness and compassion. And we get the news of what is worse in the world. But meanwhile, there are communities of kindness and compassion that are growing and growing and growing. So the world is doing what it's doing. We can't control that in the moment, but what we can control is our kindness, our love, our compassion, providing healing spaces for others, enjoying nature, conserving, and just be the energy that you believe in. And then when you go outside your community, treat everyone with regard, with kindness, even when you don't treat, even when they don't treat you that way. And I know it's funny. I remember once I stopped in a somewhere, and there was a couple of young adults from a different race that were giving me a really hard time. And I just laughed and I joked with them and I talked with them, and pretty soon they were laughing with me and joking with me, and we had a wonderful time. And they said, "Bye, you take care." But I find it doesn't fail. You know, give that person, like in our community right now, there's a little bit of bias against a certain race. And so I just make sure when I go outside, even if I don't say anything because there's not an opportunity, but when I walk by them, I smile at them, you know, and it's just these little tiny things, they have an impact. So always just be what you want the world to be and be what you want. And there's love and kindness. There's nothing more powerful than that. So continue. It will change the world eventually.
I think those words of wisdom really conclude this talk. Thank you, Diane. A heartfelt thanks from me and everyone listening, and those who will listen to you over the coming months as this goes on the Alive website and will be downloaded by many, many people, I'm sure. So thank you, Diane, for an inspirational talk this evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, as I know everybody listening and watching you has enjoyed it too. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. It's a delight to see you and an honor to be with you and with all of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Peter Williams has been a little unwell, but he's going to be fine, I'm sure, in a few weeks' time. By the 9th of November, well, he'll be well before that. But Peter's going to run the next webinar, and he's speaking on caring for your nature, our nature. So it's going to really make us think about our innate nature. So on the 9th of November, Peter. So thank you all for joining us this evening. It's been wonderful, and we wish you well.